Watch TLDR ad-free, get exclusive videos, and soon the daily briefing by signing up to Nebula for just $15 a year. And the Curiosity Stream Nebula bundle deal is linked in the description. Throughout the war in Ukraine, talks of alliances have dominated the political scene. Be it NATO and whether or not Ukraine ought to be a member, through to the sanction and weapons alliances, which collectively provided, sanctions and weapons. This talk, however, has been primarily focused on the Ukrainian side of things, for the simple reason that very, very few people or countries are standing by Russia in anything close to an alliance. From the French presidential candidates that have backtracked in their support for Putin, through to Viktor Orban's seeming unity with his fellow EU leaders. But one country that has actually stood by Russia throughout is China. Well, ish. Stood by might be putting it a little bit strongly. But let me explain. We're currently approaching 300,000 subscribers, so if you want to lend us a hand reaching that milestone and get yourself more news at this important time, then be sure to subscribe. To properly explain the current relationship between China and Russia, we need to establish the extent of their relationship before the war kicked off. So how cozy were things before the war started? Well, to put it bluntly, incredibly cozy. China and Russia seem to rapidly be becoming besties, with the adage, "the enemy of my enemy is my friend," almost perfectly explaining why their relationship was flourishing. Both ultimately view American hegemony, be it military, economic, or political, as at best not ideal, and at worst disastrous. But their unity goes deeper than just a mutual dislike of America. In more substantive terms, as we covered in an earlier video, at the beginning of February, Russian President Vladimir Putin arrived at the Beijing Winter Olympics as the guest of honor, with Putin and Xi going on to sign a 30-year contract for a huge gas pipeline linking the two countries. And the pipeline will eventually see Russian supplies of gas to China ramped up significantly. A more political and incredibly lengthy joint statement by Xi and Putin at the time went as far as stating that friendship between the two states has no limits and that there are no forbidden areas of cooperation. The statement also crucially reaffirmed the two countries' strong mutual support for the protection of their core interests, state sovereignty, and territorial integrity. So, given that there's no forbidden areas of cooperation between Russia and China, China has given its full-throated support for Russian invasion, right? Well, no, not at all. The first sign of trouble came on the 25th of February, the day after the invasion, when China abstained from the UN Security Council resolution calling for Russia to immediately cease its use of force against Ukraine and withdraw all of its military forces immediately, completely, and unconditionally. While an abstention from China might not seem that bad for Putin, as a permanent member of the Security Council, Russia could and did veto it anyway, it doesn't exactly support a no-limits friendship. In fact, UK diplomats were reportedly expecting Beijing to vote with Russia, which they obviously didn't. Fast forward a few days, and at the beginning of March, the United Nations General Assembly this time overwhelmingly backed a resolution condemning Russia's invasion and demanding an immediate halt to its aggression. 141 members voted in favour of the motion, with just 5 against: Russia, Belarus, Eritrea, North Korea, and Syria. China again abstained. In mid-March, Russian news agencies, quoting an official Russian Aviation Authority report, stated that China had refused to supply Russian airlines with aircraft parts. And while Russia has all but seized the aircraft currently on Russian territory, to stay airworthy, Russian airlines must use genuine tracked parts. Parts that currently aren't available to them directly after both Boeing and Airbus cut Russia off. In further blows to Russia, the People's Bank of China, China's central bank, doubled the trading range between the Chinese yuan and the Russian ruble, in effect allowing the ruble to fall faster and further. The PBOC has also just sat on Russia's reserves of rubles, some $90 billion, declining to comment on whether or not it will allow Russia to convert the rubles held at the PBOC into dollars or euros, something which would greatly alleviate the economic pressure being put on Russia. The Beijing-based Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank has also followed the World Bank in halting all investment and activities in both Russia and Belarus. Then, just last week, the Chinese ambassador to the US and former Vice Minister on Foreign Affairs made one of China's clearest statements yet, revising the line about a no-limits friendship between the two countries, stating that China and Russia's cooperation has no forbidden areas but has a bottom line. That line is the tenets and principles of the UN Charter, the recognized basic norms of international law and international regulations. This is a guideline we follow in bilateral relations between China and any other country. Focusing back on that joint statement though, it's interesting to note that while the statement stresses how the Russian side reaffirms its support for the One China principle, confirms Taiwan as an inalienable part of China, and opposes any forms of independence of Taiwan, the statement doesn't include any similar explicit commitment from the Chinese side when it comes to Ukraine. China merely understands and supports the proposals put forward by the Russian Federation on the formation of a long-term legally binding security guarantees in Europe, a far cry from a bilateral recognition of contested territories. Ultimately, China and Russia's friendship in part rotates around the fact that by standing together against the West, they can together face off Western pressures better than if they stood alone. Russia and China together have significant economic and, until recently, military might. By standing shoulder to shoulder against a fractured West, with, for instance, under Donald Trump, the existence of NATO coming into question, the two nations could support each other. The key thing that's changed, though, is that the West is no longer as fractured as it was. As we've seen in recent days, there are still disagreements about how far to go on sanctions and whether or not to cut off Russian gas purchases entirely. But on key issues, NATO's Article 5, European unity and territorial integrity, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has actually united the West against Russia, the exact opposite of what Russia and China set out to do. Take the sanctions implemented by the likes of the European Union, UK, US and Canada. Prior to the invasion, the freezing of Russian central bank assets would have been unheard of. As a former advisor to the European Parliament remarked, Moscow and Beijing have thrived for years on the EU's lack of political will to act to protect its interest, until Putin's invasion of Ukraine, that is. Any attempt to undermine European and global security might have real consequences then, for not just Russia, but China too. And so, China's place in all of this is ultimately who to side with. Side with Russia and face a more united West, or slowly back away from Russia and gain brownie points with the West instead. As Ryan Hass, a Brookings Institute scholar on China and Asia, notes, it's worth bearing in mind that China and Russia don't have perfectly aligned interests. China has a lot more to lose than Russia. China sees itself as a country on the rise with momentum behind it. Russia is essentially fighting the tides of decline. After all, China is Ukraine's largest single trading partner, meaning that Ukraine has a trade deficit with China, importing more than it exports, which in practical terms means that China is financially more reliant on Ukraine than the other way round, while Russia is Ukraine's second largest trading partner, with a trade deficit of $4.4 billion compared to China's $4.5. For Russia, though, the politics outweigh the economics, but the same just can't be said for China. Add to that, the US and its allies seem prepared to extend the sanctions imposed on Russia to China were it to help, and the fact that China might not be in the most economically secure position at the moment, with a property sector financial crisis ongoing. And combined, the economic calculation just keeps becoming clearer and clearer for China. However, the economic calculation isn't everything. While Beijing will, to the greatest extent possible, try to limit economic damage to China, it's unlikely that Xi is about to U-turn and begin becoming more politically aligned with what he's described as a declining West. If you want to find out more about this dichotomy, who's on Ukraine's side and who isn't, then we have another video where we run through all of the alliances which Ukraine is part of. And that video is available exclusively on Nebula, the streaming service my creative friends and I teamed up to build, where you can watch all of TLDR's videos ad-free and get a bunch of exclusive content which will never make it to YouTube. Also, next week we're bringing back our show, The Daily Briefing. And while an abridged version will be available on YouTube, the full briefing is only on Nebula. It's not just us either. All of your favourite educational creators are already there, like Wendover Productions, Real Life Law, Polymatter, Legal Eagle, Half as Interesting, and many more. But wait, we said this video was brought to you by CuriosityStream, right? Well, as a platform full of the best documentaries online, they naturally love educational creators like us. As such, we worked out a deal whereby if you sign up to CuriosityStream using the link in the description, you'll also get free access to Nebula. And that's not a free trial either. You'll get access as long as you're a member. To make things even better, for a limited time, they're offering a deal where you can get 26% off their already low price, making an entire year of both services less than $15. Less than $15 a year for all of your favorite educational creators, as well as superb documentaries on CuriosityStream. Signing up at curiositystream.com/TLDR Global or clicking the link below not only gets you the deal, but also directly supports TLDR and educational content on the platform more generally, as well as getting you original content and an ad-free experience.